Glad we have some folks joining us today. My name is Melissa Daley. I'm here with Akil George. We'll be presenting to you mostly Akil. I'm just here for introduction and being your Vanna Black today. Akil is sick, and so will have to be very sensitive to his voice. But he's here to support what we feel here at Orca Intelligence is a very important topic for us to discuss, which is sophisticated scams for the average user. We at Orca Intelligence have recently gotten into our own cybersecurity scandal, if you may, where we had organizations that were presenting as us and hiring people and asking them for money. We had that happen to a couple of our recent prospective hires. And so we want to make sure that we share with you today how you can prevent yourself from getting involved in these scams and being a victim to these sophisticated types of scams that are happening. Also, we're very happy to be doing this during Black History Month because we do feel like that this needs to be something that is shared amongst the community and amongst the worldwide so that we can protect ourselves, protect our loved ones from everyday scams that we may not always be aware of. So I am going to turn it over to Akil. His camera will not be on because, again, he is not doing well. But I just wanted to show you all that I ironed my shirt this morning. So I'm hoping that you will enjoy our presentation. So Akil, I will navigate for you and you can take it over.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Hey, my name is Akil George, and today we'll be talking about sophisticated scams. So you can go on to the next slide. So a bit of an introduction. What makes a scam sophisticated versus your everyday regular scam that you might encounter? These are kind of using methods from hackers or attackers that might look sound to even those that are tech savvy or knowledgeable about tech security or scams. They will oftentimes use vectors, attack vectors that are less general, more specific. So kind of, let's say, using current events to hook users in. Like a past one that might have been common is, let's say, using the World Cup or the Queen's death as ways to kind of hook people in with emails. Also looking for something that are users expecting an email, as we'll talk about later, and then targeting specific groups of people instead of the masses. So the first one we're going to be talking about is SMS phishing or smishing. So primarily this is done through SMS texts or text messages, as we're all familiar with. And these are attackers attempting to use text messages as a preferred method to trick a user into giving up sensitive information. So attackers will oftentimes try to get you to click on malicious links as their way to get your information and then try to get your login credentials. These attacks are also dangerous because in cases in which people are expecting the SMS messages, which can particularly add on to their effectiveness. Next slide. So the types of attacks that are in this category that you might encounter were attackers that claim to be your bank account, attempting to reach out about an issue. Let's say verifying your account information or saying there's an issue with your balance. And then attackers can also attempt to represent postal services, especially during the holidays. So saying, maybe you order a Christmas present, you're expecting a package, and then you get a text message saying that something's missing or failure to deliver. Next slide. So regarding bank-based SMS scams, here are a few examples here. So the far left, you'll find the Citibank one. Again, the common thing you'll see amongst all of these are links. As mentioned before, as being a tag vector, but then kind of also certain things that might look like legitimate, like kind of, let's say you're on an email chain or an SMS automated chain, you'll notice like the reply stop, which is very common to make it look legitimate. Essentially, you wouldn't expect to see these from any legitimate bank that you're using. Also taking note, one more thing is this, the URLs that are used in each one of these. None of these are the official banks in question, so that should also be a red flag when you're looking at these SMS scams. Next slide. So regarding postal-based scams, these are two examples. So top one looking at the U.S. Postal Service, trying to say, well, we're unable to verify your zip code, and then again prompting you to click on a link, and then other one asking to the missing complete address. We want you to verify your information. So just ways that they are trying to get information on you to abuse. Next slide. So we talked about this type of scam, so we're also going to talk about how to stop it. So the easiest way, quickest way is just do not reply to any of these messages, as well as not clicking on any links that are coming from them, especially if it's a content that you do not recognize. Do not reply to it. Also, don't be afraid to blocking numbers that you don't recognize, and as well as not clicking on any links. Next slide. Get the next slide. Okay, so next we're going to be talking about phishing or voice phishing. So the attack vector for this one are phone-based attacks using voice. Attackers will attempt to steal your personal information, trying to oftentimes pretend to be a bank. Phishing attacks also use phone calls as well as voicemails to attempt to gain information, and the idea is to get information from these attacks and then use that to impersonate you to commit fraud. Next slide. Oop. Oh, were you talking, Melissa? I couldn't hear you. It's on the chat. Did you want to say something? Oh, okay, no worries. I'll keep going. So, regarding phishing tactics. So, ideally, what the attackers are looking to do is trying to get you to share sensitive information such as your social security number, emails, passwords, anything that they can use to impersonate you. They'll also attempt to get financial information, again, impersonating banks. They'll also try to another common method or thing that they'll utilize is trying to get your voice recorded to use for attacks. So I guess like getting a voice recording of you saying yes, or any kind of confirmation, which they can then kind of play back in trying to impersonate you. And then also trying to get you to download malware. You oftentimes will see these IT scams where they'll say, oh, maybe there's an issue with your computer. Give us a call, download this application that allows us to gain access to your computer. And since we're IT, we'll help you out. And all the while it's a scam, and then you giving them access to your computer. So next slide. So how to stop these kinds of attacks. Again, number one, avoidance. Just don't pick up and answer calls from numbers that you don't recognize. That'll be a really, really good way to stop these attacks. Also, avoid giving up any personal information on calls that you receive. So unless there's a trusted entity, you generally just don't want to be giving up your social security number or any passwords over the phone. But in general, a good rule of thumb is just don't trust any unsolicited calls that you get from people you don't recognize. So next, social media scams. These are where attackers attempt to gain access through social media and trying to steal your credentials. So once they gain access, they'll try to oftentimes compromise other accounts. So this will be done usually through malicious links or attachments that they send to download malware, which might might seem like a link to, let's say, maybe a contest or something else like that. That seems very enticing. But another thing that we'll use with the rise of crypto and NFTs, they will oftentimes try to offer scams of, let's say, oh, you won this crypto prize or this money prize. But they'll also try to use current events. Given social media, that's a very common attack vector. Next slide. So some social media scams that might be a result or examples of social media scams, romance scams. If you, let's say, watching any if you've probably seen any catfish shows, something like that, that's an example. Oftentimes people are reaching out to other people, attempting to say, oh, I'm interested in you romantically, or, and trying to get information that way or money that way. Crypto investment scams, those are very common. selling followers and likes. So let's say you're trying to grow your social media following. There are people that might approach you saying, oh, we can buy this many followers. Charity scams, which is kind of one of those things that is very kind of low, but oftentimes scammers will take advantage of the situation. Let's say like the situation in Ukraine or any other tragedy. They'll put up a link to, let's say, donate to a fund, all the while it's donating to their bank account, as well as any lotteries and sweepstakes and giveaways that seem too good to be true. Next slide. So how to stop it. Again, don't open any suspicious looking links or files that you receive, even if you're someone that you might know. It leads into the next one, taking note of activity from people that you know on social media that seems unusual. I've had a few friends that have gotten, let's say, on Instagram that have been hacked. They'll kind of post something out of the ordinary saying like, hey, I just won $5,000 on crypto using this link. And obviously the person that I know in question is not a crypto person. So obviously red flag and probably something that looks suspicious. Again, avoiding things that are too good to be true, because oftentimes they are, and then setting strong privacy settings, which is a big one. If you can have it set so that not just anybody's able to message you, that'll do a really good job of making sure that attackers or random accounts cannot send you potentially malicious links. Next slide. So search engine ad pushing phishing malware or malvertising. So this is a fun one that I actually ended up looking up in my research for this presentation. So essentially, search engines allow people to purchase ad space to put their sites at the top of a related search. So when you do a Google search, oftentimes the first thing that pops up will not always be the top search. It'll be something that someone had paid money to put at the very top. So this can be then exploited by attackers to put links that look legitimate but are in fact prompting you to download something that is in fact malicious but might look legitimate. Oftentimes they'll try to get you to download malware to steal your login information. You can go to the next slide. So one example is GIMP. So for those who might not know, GIMP is a software for image editing software. It's a free alternative to Adobe Photoshop. So with the recent-ish update to Adobe Photoshop kind of being on a subscription service as opposed to a one-time purchase, that's oftentimes prompted people to now look for free alternatives or more affordable alternatives, prompting people to maybe look to GIMP, which an attacker might see and then, okay, let's find a way to then use this information and then try to put up a fake website that looks legitimate, in which people will download the software, what they think is a software, which is actually malware. And that's some of the things happened with OpenOffice, which is also a free alternative to Microsoft Office, which is also a paid service. But OpenOffice is a free alternative that attackers have used as a way to get people to download malware. Next slide. So his example, when you look at a Google search, let's say you're searching for GIMP, you would see ideally in the top an ad. It says, it would have the site of the software that you're looking for. So this one in question, this one was used in the past by attackers to get people to download a malicious link. This one, I believe, is actually the one. GIMP.org is the official one. But you'll see in the next slide with OpenOffice, one that is not legitimate, that attackers used. Can we go to the next slide? Yep. So noted on the bottom, the top, you'll see the OpenOffice or open-office.ca. So this was a screenshot from when attackers had used this in order to get people to download OpenOffice. So if you look in the bottom, so below that is the actual OpenOffice website. So the person that, let's say, is doing a search, that would probably oftentimes go to the first result, being the one that's malicious, click on the link and download the software that is not legitimate software. So it's a pretty easy way to kind of catch people that are looking for software. Next slide. So what are ways to protect yourself? So number one is avoid using sponsored links. Again, the ones that appear at the top, they'll kind of denote them as ads. or sponsored ads. But more than not, you can find what you're searching for just by scrolling a little bit down further to the actual top links. It might be annoying because there might be more than a few sponsored ads, but if you can avoid them, generally speaking. Other thing is to just make sure that whatever you're downloading from the official site and not a third party, just to ensure that the software that you're downloading is legitimate. And then the third one, which is could be a way to eliminate a lot of ads, is just using an ad blocker. Oftentimes, these will filter out promoted searches that might potentially be malicious, but otherwise just might not be what you're looking for. Next slide. So another one that I also personally have come across, I'm sure maybe others have come across, are fake job listings. So with many layoffs and large amounts of people looking for work, threat actors have taken advantage of this and have used this to find new targets. So attackers will create fake job listings or reach out to potential victims, either ask them to interview for a role or give them a job offer. Oftentimes these jobs will be remote as kind of an excuse to not interface with the person. And then oftentimes will seem too good to be true. So you might see an offer with not any real interview or not really much of an interview process to avoid any kind of human interaction, just to give you an offer letter and to try to get the information they're looking for. So next slide. So here was one that I countered. Can you go to the next slide? This will be a bit of an interactive portion. Can anyone spot the red flag in this email that was sent regarding someone soliciting a job? Just give us a second. Melissa's going to chime in. Oh, Melissa's not able to. Hold on. She might be able to. Sorry, technical difficulties.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Anyone have any questions? Do they do resumes on AgileList? Akil, your question was, can anyone spot the red flag? The spelling is wrong. Spelled wrong. Okay.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep. Go to the next slide. Good. So I guess primarily in the spelling of river, they use like an L or a capital. Yeah, probably like an L to hide it. Very small thing. But yeah, ideally, if you're aware, just keep looking at it just to make sure it's legitimate. You'll probably find this little spelling error. Next slide.
So, okay, I wanted to jump in really quickly.
Sure.
And go back a few more slides. I mean, a couple of slides back, and talk about the cell phone.
Oh, sure.
Here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I wanted to mention was that you can work with your cell phone provider and ask them to block some of the well-known scams that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
So they do have technology that's free. They have a higher rated technology if you want to pay for that monthly. So contact your cell phone provider about that. I did want to touch base on that one. And then the next thing is that someone had a question about their social media, right? Yeah, their social media scams. So I wanted to follow back up on that one. What I recommend, or what we recommend telling people, is to reach out to the FCC as well as the social media provider. So, of course, all social media platforms have a way for you to contact them directly about any scams that you may see. You can go through their policies or just look it up on any of the social media platforms in terms of how to reach out to them. But the other main way is to reach out to FCC. So if you go to the FCC's website, you will be able to find out how to report any scams. You can send emails to them directly. You can even send any of your text messages to them. One of the ways that I would say, even through personal experience, that I was able to get a lot of these, a decrease in scam text messages was based on sending the scammed text messages to the FCC directly. And so they have a specific text number that you can text them to, and then they will provide you with guidance from there. And again, like Akil said, you can do, blocking and all of that. And I will get back to slide 24, I think it was. Back to you, Akil.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, thinking of ways now that we can protect ourselves. So, number one, being careful of job offers that are sent your way. You're looking for, always try to have some kind of verification of the company, of the person reaching out to you, of the recruiter, looking up on LinkedIn. A common thing that will also happen is that outside of misspellings, they'll oftentimes use a domain that is not the official domain. So let's say someone that instead of, let's say, using Forest Rivers for the past one, saying, let's say Bob Adil at Gmail, which would look suspicious of someone, who a legitimate recruiter that would have sent a job listing would have sent it from their business email. And then, yeah, verifying the person reaching out to you and search for them at LinkedIn. So next one. So these are for references. So here are some of the links that I use in doing research to find different scams that were used in this presentation. Next slide. For the references. Next slide. Audience examples. So I guess also one last thing that I wanted to put. So before this presentation, I was also just curious to say breast insecurity. I decided to do some research on maybe what a common scam might be, just to further inform people. And what I found was that there was a scam going on, or might still be going on, for ChatGPT. So AI is becoming more prevalent, and it's an area of interest. People are using it to, let's say, write resumes, cover letters, and do papers, write articles. But there was a illegitimate, people were distributing malware through people that were looking to download Chat GPT. I believe there was like a site, it was like chat-gpt.pc.online or something like that, or chat-gpt.go. And I think it was also being promoted on even some mobile sites like Google Play, and third-party third-party Android app stores. So yeah, just another way. So like when it comes to security, attackers are always trying to stay relevant, trying to look at current events, current trends, and trying to find ways that are going to further be able to, get victims. So yeah, just a little thing that I found and wanted to inform you guys that was in the presentation. So yeah, any questions that people have, or maybe examples of scams that you guys have experienced?
Yeah, put anything that you have in the chat. We'll be able to answer them. I saw a couple of people reference the email that you had to squint and so forth. Well, it's ironic that you say that, because that's what people, scammers, are betting on, is that you're not going to read everything, whether or not it's because of you wear glasses and you don't have your glasses on, or whether or not you just may transpose letters. Like, I know me, I have a slight dyslexia at times, and so I will easily transpose a letter. And so a lot of scammers bet on that. So just make sure that you slow down. One of the things that I like to reference is, like, slow down when you are reading something, especially if it's something that you're not familiar with, but more so when it's something that you are familiar with, because most of the time scammers will try to get you because you are familiar with that. Like, if you have a Gmail account or something like that, just make sure that you slow down and comprehend what you're receiving from scammers, or just from anyone really, and then be able to respond appropriately and not to react. And I'm saying this based off experience. Try not to react to the information that you're seeing presented, but respond with intent and be intentional about your response. Do we have any questions?
Oh, I wanted to. So
Oh, go ahead.
it's not. It wasn't a question, but someone who was, I think, from Twitch, pro grammar 27. So I use Twitch, and I guess just calling out, I guess, different vectors that people use for scams. So if you're a gamer, you're on Twitch, you might be familiar with watching, let's say, a video game, and there's specific drops or in-game content that you can get from watching a streamer. So I remember several times that I've been watching a stream, someone will randomly message me and saying, "Hey, click on this link. You can get some new DLC or something from Call of Duty." Um, I've gotten several ones of that. So just again, just inform people of different attack vectors. Um, There's another question. What are your thoughts on international companies using publicly available resumes and then impersonating the person in the U.S.? Um, hmm. Do you have any thoughts,
Strong.
Melissa? I mean, yeah. Outside of it being wrong, I think that's especially with AI getting bigger and kind of it doing scraping of publicly available information. So let's say if you have your resume up online, I feel like it might get easy for people to kind of impersonate. But um, hmm, that's yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there in terms of in programmer 27. I'm going to get to your question in a second. But your thoughts on international companies using publicly available resumes. One of the things that, personally, this is just opinion, is that I feel like, we need our own operating system as the United States in order to have people have access to our networks. But that's just me, and it's personal opinion. And then we can kind of have some more formal control over who has access to our information, right?
Mhm.
Also, I do think it's a matter of public policy needs to be changed so that international companies don't have access to certain things. So, for example, everyone here is probably familiar with Microsoft Azure and AWS and so forth. Um, and so, you can kind of if it was required policy wise by the federal government for everybody who is a U.S. organization to have their policies where only certain IP addresses or only certain areas were able to access their information or for them to dispense that information. Uh, I think that would help in terms of having better protocols as an organization, would help us from having those types of publicly available information to international companies. Hopefully that answers your question, Nicole. And then going back to programmer 27, Akil, did you want to take that one? I get phishing
Oh
and
yeah, I answered that one.
okay, sorry, I missed it.
No worries. Mr. Nocho had said, "Do you have the number that we can text to text
Yeah,
scams to?"
yeah. So that number is 7726. If you Google FCC scam text, you'll see the text that you can, the number that you can text any of your scam texts to. Again, that's 7726. I think that's what I said. All right.
Okay.
7726. Yeah.
And then Gerald Scott has said, "What's the best way to approach a client about a potential breach without causing fear?" I mean, definitely notify them, but I guess the method in which you would want to avoid causing fear is probably coming to them not only with just the fact that there was a data breach, but as well with potential mitigation steps or what you've already done. To stop or prevent the data breach or remediate any damage they've been taking, maybe reporting on if there's been any loss, what's typically been lost. I guess to not cause fear, and I would just more or less like try to come up with ways you can remediate it or remedy the attack or kind of get the attack under control to what is it? Stop. Oh, Mr. Donosho said that they Googled it right after.
Yeah, I saw that. No need to apologize. I understand completely.
um, And then a LinkedIn user had asked about thoughts on data privacy issues with TikTok. It seems users aren't affected by the fact that their data is at risk and being stolen by malicious attackers. So I personally do not use TikTok, but I do, in keeping up with some current events, it is something that I think is being banned or is banned now with government devices in the US. So I feel like those bans might also trickle down or expand to other industries. So I think in terms, let's say, if you're looking to inform other people of the data privacy issues that come with TikTok, one thing I would do is kind of note how the government is taken to it. And I guess if that's the standard, you could kind of reference that and saying that if the government is not seeing this as a application that is providing sufficient data privacy, then we ourselves should not be using it in either in a company or also just on a personal level as well. Um, Pro Gamer 27 or Programmer 27 said, so come in with not only the breach but solutions. Yes, well, not just also solutions. If you can probably come up with a detailed I guess mini report or as to what has transpired to kind of, I think it's a difference if you come to a client saying there's been a breach versus there's been a breach. This is what was affected. This is these are the controls in place that we have, and maybe what failed and what worked and what we're doing, if that helps.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, depending on the organization, that your client's organization, if they don't already have a cybersecurity policies and procedures in place, recommend that they have one so that they can also tell you how you need to navigate through that. Don't always take up the responsibility because it is a mutually agreed upon activity between you and your client. So make sure that you also educate your client on how they need to have their own cybersecurity policy, and then work with them on how they can communicate to you as well as you communicate to them. How do we
Um,
deal with the emotional hardship? What can you describe that a little bit more?
I mean, if I'm going to assume that maybe with regards to, I guess, security, there might be a lot of fatigue that happens, as it's an industry that does involve consistent. You have to be up to date with security. It's one of those things that are like um, you always have to be abreast as to what attackers are doing, and in many cases, it's something that you might take a weekend. Okay, you go on a weekend with an attacker, gets into infrastructure. That means that you have to fix that immediately. So in that regard, I don't know. I feel like if referring to that aspect of the job, that's very difficult to manage the work-life balance, I guess, or so to speak, or kind of staying abreast. If that's what you're referring to, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the things we done recently was move to our own uh, instance of cloud, so that we could protect ourselves more granularly. So that's one of the things, and that has been emotionally taxing, I would say.
Oh, also, Akim had asked about, are you going to share the presentation? I believe that there will be a recording of the presentation that we put up
I,
later on.
I think so. Yeah, we'll check with Bic and confirm that.
Sure.
Wait 1 second, Akil. There was one
Sure.
question I feel like I don't know. You may have answered it, which was, did we talk about in, um, did we mention calls from scammers that pretend to be your TV provider or ISP? Did we talk about that one?
No, we didn't talk about that one.
Yeah, let's revisit that. What are your opinions?
Service provider. I mean, there's certain things that oftentimes I don't think that they. I guess a red flag is that these service providers oftentimes won't reach out to you. I don't think, unless it's like there won't oftentimes be a phone call. Oftentimes it's you reporting issues. In my experience, unsolicited calls from service providers, banks, oftentimes can I would be suspicious of just in general, um, as a first thing, and even then
Yeah,
I would be wary of, let's say, giving out any information over the phone, regardless of if they're asking you for a credit card. I would just opt not to do so.
yeah, and also the thing is too is that when you're working with someone like the IRS, excuse me, or your bank, they have certain protocols. Again, this is why I go back to making sure whatever company, if it's your client or whomever, that you understand what their practices are. So, for example, if you call a bank, in order for them to access your account. They have certain procedures. Understand what those procedures are when you sign up with that bank. For an ISP or for a TV provider, same thing. If you understand what their procedures are from when they contact you, understand what those are and make sure that you're following them, but also help some of your family members too. Because I know with aging parents and relatives, they're not as flexible in understanding what those policies are.
Um, there was, I think,
Did we
Jovan had
get
mentioned something again, asking, there's risk everywhere though. T-Mobile has 3 breaches in the past 2 years. That's unfortunately, I guess, what with security, breaches are very much so commonplace. It's just, I guess, in terms of mitigating that risk. There, when starting up for a service, you are taking a risk in terms of believing in their security of your information, and there are things that you can do to kind of mitigate that risk in terms of, let's say, um, I don't know, let's say maybe using a credit card, because oftentimes the process of recouping losses from a credit card are much easier versus using a debit card, or I don't know, maybe signing up to a service using not using the same password. So if there is a breach, let's say I'm like T-Mobile, as you mentioned, they don't then have access to my bank account because I use the same password. So there are different kind of methods that you can ways you can mitigate risk on your end, and not trust entirely the security of the service that you're using.
did we answer Michael Chronicles?
Um, no, we did not answer the sale once. Yeah, that is one that kind of does happen, in which they will try to. So there will be calls, let's say, where they pick up immediately and they kind of say hello, and there'll be no response, or just kind of calls that I've gotten where you don't hear any kind of response at all. I believe oftentimes they're just looking to record your voice saying hello. Is anyone there? Or yes. Um, so if you hear nothing, let's say when I pick up a phone, I just wait for someone to speak first. And if no one speaks, I just hang up. Or oftentimes the phone will just hang up by itself. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, one of the tricks that I do, and I'd share this with one of my aging friends the other day, is I start talking in a totally, completely different accent or voice. That's not mine. And then I basically, you know, pretend that I'm the scammer on the other end and just say something like, hey, is this Tom? Is this Charles or whatever? But like, I'll start speaking Spanish or something like that just to kind of change my voice because I know that it could be some type of scam to record my voice and use that later on. Nicole
um,
C, I think, is the next one.
yeah. So I feel like this one is more related to legislation. To my knowledge, she's asking if there what type of laws, practices are put in place. To my knowledge, there really isn't. I think it's very common for, as you mentioned, lots of companies to kind of offshore roles. Um, I don't think in terms of legally speaking, I'm not sure if that is uh, if there are laws in place to stop that. That's outside of my realm of expertise personally, so I can't 100% speak on that. But to my knowledge, there isn't really a protection against that legally, not much at least.
Yeah, I would check with Department of Labor.
Yeah.
There are certain things in terms of policies with Department of Labor that is actually illegal. And so, from a Department of Labor standpoint, if you do see that happening, I would report it to Department of Labor. A lot of people are not as interested in working with federal government projects, but being as though I think we have a large background in working with federal government projects, which I would suggest anybody here, if you're interested, you should look into supporting federal government projects. And for the sense of is this is where you make a real huge impact in cybersecurity, right? Like for Nicole C's question, um, is this something that is prominent amongst, or is this something that is looked into? Are this practices that prevent this? There are practices that prevent that because you can't present someone and then mislead them. Like that's just wrong, right? And not only is it wrong, but it's also illegal. So if the reason why Department of Labor exists is so that you can go ahead and report this stuff. So if you do see it, please make sure that you share that information with them. Any other questions? I see root cause analysis process. I like that. Thank you, Ludwin. I think that is. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on. I should probably walk over and get it. This is in the commercial sector. This couldn't happen in federal spaces. No. What I'm saying about the federal, I see that, Nicole. What I'm saying about the federal spaces is that if the commercial sectors you can't legally present someone, right? Any organization, like even us, like I can't present somebody to an organization, whether I'm trying to present to Coca-Cola, it doesn't matter. Like as a private organization, I can't, it's illegal for me to present someone and then that be the wrong person, right? And swap them out. So what I'm saying is that you have to report that information to the Department of Labor if you see any of those things happening, regardless if it's federal, regardless if it's commercial. You have to report that information if you see it. Hopefully that makes sense in terms of, who to report it to. So again, going back to some of the things that we talked about, FCC, if you see any, scams coming through your phone, if you see anything in recruitment that is, below par and not acceptable, I would report that to the Department of Labor. Right. So going back, Nicole, the Department of Labor is there to police organizations' labor practices. So if their labor practices are not in par with the laws of the United States, you have to report that to the Department of Labor. Regardless if they're private or public company, it doesn't matter. If someone's hiring practices are not in accordance with the United States government, you must report it to the Department of Labor.
Hey, Ernest, is there any other questions?
Awesome. What is the topic? Yeah, we started. Oh, yes, you're welcome. Yes, you're very, very welcome. Yeah, Nicole, if you want to talk more on LinkedIn, you can send me a chat or something. But thank you all for joining. Our topic at this time was about sophisticated scams for the average user. If you have any questions, I think it's Ernest, please share. Yes, no problem. You are very, very welcome. Thank you all for joining us. You can reach us through LinkedIn or through our website. Send us a chat. Please, reach out to BIC directly. They're always doing great work. We appreciate working with them on a regular basis in order to share this information. Akil, anything you want to leave the audience with?
We did have one other question. If you wanted to see, someone asked if any thoughts on online gambling sites. I personally not a gambler and would avoid them. I know I had seen there were a lot of sites that had gambling involving crypto. Those might have been in Canada because I know there was more stricter laws regarding that in the U.S. In terms of regulating that. But in terms of that, I don't know. I'm not a gambler myself. I personally cannot. I would be. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts, Melissa?
Yeah, the main thing that I would say is For online gambling, be very cautious. Um, be very cautious, and like Akil said, I'm not a gambler as well, but understand the I think it's five, depending on where you are in the state of Maryland. I think there's now five um, uh, online gambling organizations. So understand who those five are, and when you get that, when you understand who those five organizations are, make sure you understand what apps they have on their marketplace and on their website, what how they're, who has developed the apps for them, so that you're aware of when you go into the app store, you're not trying to download somebody else's app that may be mimicking theirs. That's the key, I think, is to know your vendor, know what solutions they are providing you, and then from by understanding the solutions that they're providing you and having an intimate connection with them, you will know whether or not they're scamming you. That goes back to understanding their policies and procedures, and then understanding, whether or not they've created their own app and you'll see their vendor name listed under the app, or if they have outsourced that app and created and have that app created by someone else.
I also had some input because you also Luke McGinn also asked about the with the emergence of celebrity endorsements. How can we determine what's legit or scamming? I would take any endorsement from, I guess, a celebrity with a grain of salt, because oftentimes they're paid up
Mm-hmm.
front and might not even be using the app that they're purporting that there are what is it, advertising to the public. They might have gotten several millions of dollars already and aren't even using the app themselves. We're kind of paid to say it works, it's nice, I made money off of this. So off of that alone, I would not take that as a sign of legitimacy. But another thing is just also looking up the entity itself and possibly seeing, its financial records, looking to see if it has, any scandals, maybe, how much, like, what's the revenue, what are their financial reports looking like. I think someone had looked up a company that was pretty prevalent, I think, when it came to crypto gambling, and they had found that its like headquarters looked very shady. When they looked at it in Google Maps, it was like, I think, a shack or something in some random place. So definitely research the organization as well. I would always be sure as to where you're putting your money, uh, being certain that it's going to a place that is legitimate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the general gist is, this is going to be a simple way for me to kind of simplify this, but it's just like reading a book. When you're reading a book, you have, you know, um, reading comprehension. And so just thinking about digital comprehension, like get informed about whatever it is that you're seeking to accomplish online, whether that be online banking, gambling, or if it's, paying your taxes online, whatever that is, get informed before you make a decision. Slow down. I know that's hard in our societies, slow down, but one of our values is mindfulness. So making sure that you're mindful and intentional about the actions that you're about to take online. Sometimes, most of the times, it can just wait, because that is really the key to prevention, right? That's the proactive way to preventing you from being scammed, is making a conscious, intentional decision on you understand what you're about to respond to, you understand why you're responding to it, and how you need to respond to it. So if you can just keep all those three things in mind, you will prevent yourself from a lot of scammers. I think we had another question about where do I contact to ask some cybersecurity RF. Yeah, this is not, that's going to be way too high level for this one. Um, any other questions? We just have a few more minutes left. Thank you all for joining. If you have, you have some last minute questions, we're here to answer those before we depart. Do you see the other question, Akil? But the way, are there email extensions to block PEC which are commonly known?
I can see that one. Let me see. Business email compromise. What a way. By the way, are there email extensions to block which?
Yeah, so the only way that I would say that, like, we do some of that within our organization, for us internally, like we have online or cloud-based policies. So you have to create cloud-based policies, depending on if your mail server is off on-prem or if it's cloud, basically. So whether or not it's on-prem or off-prem. But if your mail servers are in the cloud, and even if they're not, you can always set up these policies that are allowing you to safeguard your employees or your environment from to block, your emails from being compromised. And so, um, yeah, so that's one of the things that we're doing is getting into our cloud solution provider and setting up the policies and rules. And like most of these solution providers have really, I think, helpful rules or policies that allow you to navigate through the security levels. Hopefully, hopefully that answered the question.
I would say also this might be, I'm not sure if it's too high level, but there are some solutions that organizations can take. I feel like that question might vary depending on different organizations. But it's one solutions, let's say Proofpoint, that kind of deal with like email security and phishing emails that can further help automate the process. And so you're not kind of like going through listening to them, by hand. We also had a question from Nicole C. as to what sources, sites would you recommend for people to maintain awareness of new sophisticated scams. I would say there's several information security news sites that I would look at. There's
You had
several.
one you shared with me, right?
Yeah, there's one that I like is Simply Cyber. A shameless plug of Simply Cyber. So I think it's he's a PhD, Gerald Ozier. I think every Monday through Friday, he does do a podcast. I think it's about 30 minutes or so, kind of giving a rundown of recent security news. I think he gets it from a CISO site. Essentially, it's like he's getting the information from current events and giving his perspective on it. And it's very informative, whether you're kind of a newbie in security or someone who is already in the industry. So I recommend that. But any kind of, there's several, I'm sure, information security podcasts, as well as just news sites that will kind of give you a daily dose of, what's going on in the industry. I highly recommend people staying up to date. Michael Chronicle loves Gerald. Yep. But it's something that I recommend because, like, again, just this morning I looked up try to find something that was recent. I found out about the Chat GPT. So I think that's definitely something to know about, especially if you're an everyday person, you're hearing about AI. Cyberwire podcast. Yep, that's another good one. Yeah, there's like, let's say the AI becoming bigger and bigger. I would expect certain that to be exploited, especially when there's not much regulation involved with it. So it's good to kind of know about, okay, what's hot, how is it being exploited. Just in general, I look for any kind of podcasts. I'm sure there's a plethora. I'm blanking on some names. Hacker Humans. Yep. If you know any, shout them out in chat. I'll probably write some of these down too myself.
Yeah. I see. So, Ernest, I think it is, you had questions about, you wanted to ask about some of your systems that you're thinking about. So, this particular course is not the one for those. I think someone at BIC may be able to help you with that. Hopefully, that's helpful. All right. Well, that's all we have, I believe. Thank you all. Any finalized questions, Akil, or comments rather?
I guess feel free to reach out to either of us if you have any further questions. It's been a pleasure. This is my second time speaking at BIC with Melissa, and especially during Black History Month.
I thought this was the third.
Third? Might have been the third.
Maybe.
I forget.
Yeah,
But thank you for having us. Thank you for coming. I hope you all took something away, learned something. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yep. Thank you.